Selectors, and welcome back to Lifeburst Podcast. I am Andrew, and I'm here to talk about some more Dissonance Diva decks. This time we're talking about Hanayo, who's definitely going to have an impact in the meta for sure. Had a pretty big impact in the Japanese meta. Hanayo is one of the first aggro cards that is genuinely pretty good. So with aggro, there's some issues with how aggro functions in Wixoss in general as a game that makes me usually not want to play various cards that could be considered aggro centers. Mainly, the biggest one is basically being unable to do safe damage, aka damage that is that's not going to just get blown out by life bursts, right? Hanyo mitigates that to a certain extent, which is why I actually think Hanyo is a pretty good aggro center. So without any further ado, let's just jump into what Hanyo does, which is it's a Dissona center, with level 3 at the beginning of your attack phase. If all of the field on your field, Signy on your field are Dissona, you can target one Signy on your field and you can pay colorless red. If you do that, Signy gains Assassin or Double Crush till end of turn. You also get this once per game or once per turn action where you can discard a card from your hand, and then you can either draw a card or enter charge once. And you get an action which is exceed 4. Usually that's once per game. Crush one card in your opponent's life cloth. Okay, so there's a lot of reasons to like Hanyo here. This is all almost unanimously an upgrade from what's the name, Hirana, which is our dash center currently. With the downside of it being you have to run completely Dissona deck, which, while is not technically a downside because Dissona are just a little more powerful in general, it does mean that it doesn't future-proof it as well, since you can't just play the best of everything always and call it a day. But let's talk about what makes this card unique. First off is the ability to crush your opponent's life cloth. Now, when we're talking about dash in this Wixoss, it is a pretty well-known archetype at this point, with the idea of you're trying to go as fast as possible and deal as much damage as possible. Crushing an opponent's life cloth is not technically dealing damage, therefore there are going to be some scenarios where that's going to be awkward, right? You'd rather have it be when this attacks, it deals damage to your opponent, so that way you can threaten, the end of the game, because crush doesn't kill the opponent. However, having it so easy to function as being a crush immediately with just the little cost being exceed, it ends up being a very, very, very good card. It's just dealing damage very easily. And it's safe because, again, you probably don't have anything on the field. You don't really care what you crush. Your opponent might hit something like, vanish target up to Signy, and you don't have any Signy on the field, so you're good. That's the reason to like it. The other reason to like it is that you get the ability to give something Assassin or Double Crush. Now, this is pretty strong. Outside of having, if you're only able to open up one lane a turn, right? Giving something Double Crush for 2 enter means that you're dealing 2 damage, and technically your other Signy are probably already down. Therefore, the blowback from life bursts is less. It still has the blowback from the, if you open up your opponent's field and you do Double Crush, well, you're twice as likely to lose another attacker, but you're still safe because you dealt extra damage. Double Crush is a good ability. I don't think I really need to go super into it. It is just one of those things where Double Crush actually does equate into safer damage in some situations and unsafer damage in some situations. But in those situations, you also have Assassin, which is great. Assassin can basically guarantee, it's unblockable. It guarantees that you'll hit your opponent no matter what for at least 1 damage on your turn, and then your Elrig swing for hopefully 2 damage, right? So this is really good against specifically control decks, because now when they exhaust their resources, namely their assist Elrigs against you, you can start threatening in a damage no matter what. Now that is very safe damage and means that inevitably you win these long games. The best aggro deck prior to this, and I won't even say Dash because I don't even think Dash was the best aggro deck, but the best aggro deck prior to this was Tama, mono white Tama Clear. And that had a similar ability where it basically said, I will win this game. I will do a lot of damage in the early turns, and then if this game doesn't promptly end by turn 5, by turn 6, turn 7, if this game continues on, I will end it by doing damage. It has a similar effect to that Elrig with this, and that's why I think this deck is specifically good. Not only does it play the dash component well, which is just that super speedy component, it also plays the longer game component well, and that's not something necessarily dash decks have inherently built into them. Something different that Hanayo is able to do. All right, I've spent way too long explaining why Hanayo herself is a really, really good Elrig. Let's move right along into the actual deck itself. So, what I've decided to go with at least this first Desona set coming out. Again, it's always awkward to make a Desona deck without set 13, because set 13 comes out complete sort of like the second half of the Desona, and there's just a lot less holes that you're working with in the deck. But I think just straight off how powerful Hanayo is on its own, that it kind of makes the deck function regardless of even if it has an incomplete main deck. Um, what I decided to do basically, the next step was I saw Hanayo and I immediately was like, yeah, I just want to run Ultra Superheroes. Ultra Superheroes I know is known for being a control card, but those days are past now with the color restrictions lifted. Ultra Superheroes is one of the best aggressive cards you could possibly use. Not only does it open up a hole on your opponent's field, it allows you to get more cards in your hand. Normally, aggro's got a little bit of softness to discard, so this helps patch up that, while simultaneously getting you guards or more damage if you need to open up more lanes with that type of effect. But then more importantly, you also get to mill your opponent 10. So with a little extra mill, 4 or 5 cards more milled, you are almost always milling your opponent out. That's an extra damage. Extra damage means that you win this game sooner. More importantly, it's extra damage on your main phase, rather than the attack phase or the Elrig swing phase, which means that it's just more damage in turn. Right, these faster aggro decks would prefer to do more damage sooner less damage but more sooner than more damage over time but over the course of multiple turns. They want to push this tempo a little bit. So I knew immediately that was my goal, was to play that. Now, the second thing that I think most people would want to play is Go to the Top. Go to the Top, it being a 3-enter piece that burns your opponent for 3, and that lets you find the best card in your deck and put it in your hand. I decided against playing that. My reasoning being very simple. Hanayo is expensive. Not only do you have to pay to grow, but you also need to pay for your super heroes, and you have to pay 2 enter per turn. With that in mind, I just didn't think we even really had the enter to spare to play Go to the Top. I know some people will still want to. In fact, I actually felt opposite to that. I felt like this is one of the first times in the world I actually want to play Xeno Cluster. But this deck feels to me like a good one to play Xeno Cluster. Yes, it's useless in certain matchups because you're the aggro deck, you don't really need a second piece. I mean, there is going to be another piece coming out in the future that crushes the opponent's life cloth directly, which is great. You can use that instead. In the meantime, Xeno Cluster feels like it does that job regardless. But it also protects your hand, something that this deck discards pretty quickly down, as well as it protects your enter, and you kind of need the enter to get the double crush. So that's the reasoning I went with this. As far as my other assists here, you'll see I've got Wing Slash and Wings Machina Smash. These are just the best things you could be playing at the time. We're playing enough black that getting back a Signy with this, namely, I don't know, Bang or something like that, something powerful, maybe one of your level 1s that open up lanes, is all a relatively good idea to do. Plus, Wing Slash just makes you a little bit more versatile against discard, makes you a little bit harder to hate out. It's always going to be good. The level 1s in here are obscene because they all open up lanes, so those are also things to consider. Pawn doesn't get you guards. That's kind of sad about the deck, but outside of that, gets you any other 2 cards you need. This deck is a little bit toolboxy in terms of just Desona in general. You have to spread yourself out a little bit, so I don't mind it here. And then Dojan is just a cheap way to do this. They're going to discard a card pretty easily. They're going to pay a colorless pretty easily. This is better if you're running certain enter burn stuff. Again, Go to the Top being in here. Either way, I just think this is the best level this is the best white Elrig currently to use. I think when Remember Assist comes out, that's probably takes its spot. I actually don't really love Lion as a 3-stop in this deck because I think it's too expensive. And I don't like Akino or Liz either. They just underperformed at the GP. And because they underperformed at the GP, literally I have data that shows that they made decks worse in general. I didn't think this was the deck for it. They also cost a little bit more enter. They're a little more enter intensive. So I just wanted something cheap. This is literally the cheapest thing that you could possibly do and get a little bit of advantage off of it. So that's why I decided to go with that. And I needed white, to trigger ultra superheroes. That's just what I was. That card is strong enough to not have the Grace White assist to be like, yep, this is perfectly fine. Cool. So we talked about the Elrig deck. Let's talk about the main deck here. Now, the main issue right now with Hanayo is fitting in red cards. The red cards that are currently available are not that strong. They're okay, but they're not that strong. Namely, let's look at the main partner Signy of Hanayo. Secra. So Secra is not a really great Elrig. I would put it down to 2 of in the deck if I could, but there's just not enough life bursts to go around, so I left it as a 3 of. This would be the first thing I'd cut in set 3 to bring it down to a 2 of, and then put some better cards in here. It's got an okay ability. The fact is that at the beginning of your attack phase, if all the Signy on your field are Dissona, and there are 2 or more cards in your opponent's enter, you get to enter burn them 1. So yeah, it's got a usable ability there. It's also got the ability that auto when the Signy crushes Life Cloth on your opponent. They can't activate it unless they pay 1, so again, it taxes them a little bit. Helps out a little bit with that enter burn. But neither of those things are so fundamentally great that you want to be like, this card is a 4 of. All of them do cool things that help the deck out in a side method, but none of them help the deck out in a direct method. So yeah, it's one of those ones that I would want a 2 of. Also, its life burst is just not that good. We go through these cycles in Wixoss where the life burst of draw 2 cards then enter charge 1, right, is good, and then it's bad, then it's good, then it's bad. These are specifically good when they don't affect the board and they give you resources. These types of effects are really good when the game is currently going slow. We're talking about it's like turn 6, 7, 8. These end up being really good. I don't think Hanayo ever really wants to be in a deck that is wanting to take that long. It theoretically could, which is nice. But that being said, I don't think this is where I want to be like, yep, that life burst is perfect for this deck. So I think it's a little bit of a swing and a miss with this deck. But it has a life burst, and we need life bursts right now, so it's a 3 of. The red cards that we can talk about and can say are amazing are Firecracker. Look, Firecracker is just the best Signy in Dissona, period. I don't know what else to say about there. When it enters, you discard a card from your hand. It's a Dissona. Target a Signy on your opponent's field to pyro 5,000 else vanish it. That's gonna get you all the way to the end of mid game being relevant. And honestly, it's probably gonna get you into your late game when your 3-3-1 splits that your opponents are doing. It's probably gonna help you get there as well too. A lot of level 2s are also 5,000 power, and we were using them to dodge level 1 removal. They're not gonna dodge as easily anymore, so this card's gonna be great for it. To back up its level 1 claims, we also have a couple Musica, just 2. Because it just does what Firecracker does, but just a little worse. And then we also have Werewolf, 2 of as well here. I needed a little bit more green for a reason we'll talk about in a second. And this is also just a way to open up lanes at level 1. That's also very good. The other thing to talk about while we're talking about Werewolf is specifically Anuiz, I don't know how to pronounce it. Crimson Angel. This card has a great life burst, right? You're playing it for the life burst, basically, is what you're doing. Red doesn't have a selection of huge Dissona, and this is one of the few ways that you can get red Dissona in there, so you can pay for costs. It also has the ability to give a Dissona on your field when it attacks, plus 5,000 power. 5,000 plus 3,000 is 8,000, if you don't know, which means that Werewolf can vanish a lot of Signies that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get rid of in the white deck. Now, specifically, Rill is the one Signy I don't have in here, and that's just because I've got some weird life burst issues with this deck. It's just very non-life burst heavy. So Rill will probably show up instead of that tech in set 13, I would say, once we get access to more life burst cards. But this is just a way for us to sneak more red in. While we're talking about level 1s, we probably should bring up Maho Maho. Maho Maho is just when this attacks, you can mill your opponent too. This helps again. You're trying to get at least a 2 to 3 to 4 more cards milled from your opponent. And this is a way to do it, and it's also a way to do it that you can recur with some of the effects that you have on your machinas. So you can get this in early. It may seem useless to attack for 2, to mill for 2 in the early game, but it adds up. Trust me, if you play 2 of these, you basically have done the job of refreshing your opponent outside of the mill 10. But if that didn't work, there's another way to do it, which is this card, Orizel, Bacteria. When it attacks, you mill your opponent 6, right? That'll get it. Almost always that'll get it. We are playing a little bit of cards to bring that card back to our hand. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Here we go. Kagu Mika. This is another way that we can bring some black cards back to our hand outside of Machina that might help you get the finalized mill. So that's a little bit of a package that's built into this deck. The other package that's built into this deck is a little bit of green. We do need Energizing. So I currently have 3 of. I couldn't figure out a way to really fit the 4th of comfortably in this deck, but I think 3 is enough. This just helps you Energize a little bit, which just helps you then get Ener for your effects more easily. So I think it's comfortably as a 3 of, and now that I'm already over here sitting pretty at 5, why not add Bang? Bang is a 3 of right now. Probably goes down to a 2 of in the next set, but it's very powerful right now. It gets around Exia, it gets around a lot of other annoying ways that you can't open up lanes, especially the bigger powered things. You can pretty comfortably get rid of 8,000s or less in this deck. So the ability to get rid of 10,000 or more with this is just great. It completes Red's sort of like open all lanes abilities here. Again, I think it's probably a 2 of in the future, but right now it's a 3 of. I filled out the deck with a couple other choices here too. Like we've got an Umir. This comes back from your trash. That's probably the most notable thing from it, is that it can come back from your trash. And then it opens up a lane, 10,000. So it helps you bridge that late game gap should you need it. Let's see what else. There is Hanayo here. Again, I just want another black card, and this does a job of basically doing negative 3,000 on the opponent's turn, or on your turn to kill an opponent. So pretty good. We've got 3 park openings. Let's go down the spells. Park openings also help you open up lanes. They're pretty fantastic. They leave you spells in general leave you a little open to being discarded out. That's where Xeno Cluster can come in clutch, kind of help you make sure that your hand's padded a little bit later in the game, because there's barely anything that draws you cards in this deck. And then the last thing here is Grow Wings, which, again, energizes you. Just the idea of being like, by the time that card advantage is needed, you should already be winning the game. So it should be as simple as, you draw this just adds to your Ener, and that should give you enough resources to push the game win early, rather than try to live this game out long. So that's the reason why you're going to be playing this type of card. There is something to note here, though, between the Grow Wings and the play here, over here, the Kagomika. That is quite a few cards that bring cards back from the trash to the field. I mean, it's 4, so it's not a huge amount, but that is something to consider with Dissona, is that when you add Grow Wings and you have this card in general, you're also meaning that you're gonna need to consider, what's in your Ener, what's in your trash. because it'll allow you to play things on the opponent's turn and then maybe get rid of some of your opponent's cards. Which again, if you have firecrackers and musicas for, that's sort of a beautiful thing to do, to just sort of like close down 2 lanes, put something into block, and then kill a different open lane, and then now from one burst you've stopped 2 damage, right? That's the dream goal. So that's kind of what you want to be looking to do with this Hanayo aggro deck. I think this is quite good. Again, once next set comes out, it gives you just a whole nother suite of red cards. Specifically, there's a good level 2, there's a good level 3, and there's also a good level 1 that has Life Burst, which means these numbers can get much better. And then you can make this deck basically almost mono red with a light black and green splash in order to get your enter and your recursion package and your mill package together. And then this is going to be a pretty complete deck. I mean, I would say this deck would be strong enough to take for a couple of years down the line. It can probably hang out with all the top tier threats too.